Hey folks, Michael Mann with Michael Mann Security Services. We're going to talk about behavior threat detection and today's threats at churches. So I'm going to get into, we start talking about the threat spectrum. We're going to talk about active threats or active assailants. Now understand, before we get into this in behavior threat detection, I want you to understand from a risk perspective. And I've been a security professional for over 20 years, conducting very comprehensive risk assessments and designing physical protection programs for just about any industry you can think of, to include churches and houses of worship. So I'm not a novice at this, but understand, when we talk about risk, we talk about the active threats. It is a very low likelihood event with a very high consequence level, which means it's more likely that you're going to have a medical event or some sort of a severe weather event that threatens the church before you have an active assailant event. So no fear mongering here, okay? So as we get into this, let's just talk about what's the problem today with the active assailants in churches. Well, when we start talking about when this occurs, a couple things in houses of worship. Number one, these folks they have unchallenged access into the protected space, which means they're not sneaking in, they're walking in with the weapons and they conduct the attacks. Warning signs, which are always present, and that is biblical, by the way. It goes all the way back into Genesis, where all this started. These warning signs are not detected or they're not managed, which means, so if there is a security function there, whether that's a police officer or some sort of volunteer security function, the warning signs or those indicators are not detected early, or they're detected and no one knows what to do with them, so they don't know how to manage them, so how to prevent it. Law enforcement response, if we have to wait on this, is always delayed. Not their fault, especially if they're coming from off-site. Not their fault, but it is the design of law enforcement based on the constitutional republic that we live in. So that's always going to be delayed, and the majority of these events, over 80%, are over before the police even arrive. Security response. If there is a security response, that is responsive and not preventative, which means, number one, it doesn't stop the attack. Number two, it's dangerous for everybody, not only the security team members, but people in the congregation, both physically and legally. So it can be very, very dangerous. And again, sometimes it's just not effective based on levels of training, resources, etc. So how is it that we address this threat? And that's through behavior threat detection. Behavior threat detection is a very simple process of implementing fundamental physical security principles, gaining an understanding of the operational environment in your house of worship, and validating behavior for the purpose of preventing predatory violence. And we do that in two very quick 3.5 hour training sessions. And that is done for your volunteers, your staff members, and if you have law enforcement personnel, they can be trained in this also. Now, the benefits of this are, number one, is it prevents acts of crime and mass violence. This is very preventative in nature. There is a huge return on investment that can be measured because it's very low cost for a very, very large group, and it doesn't take a lot of time, especially the basic course, module 1, which is the most important. So you can measure the return on investment and prove just how valuable this is to the church. There's not anybody listening to this that can't afford it. This gives you a biblical approach to understanding threats and implementing security. I've designed physical protection programs for nuclear facilities, chemical facilities, data centers, corporations, manufacturing sites, private Christian schools, churches, government programs, you name it. The principles of physical security and those functions are the same, no matter where you're going to put them in. But the strategy is much different, especially in a house of worship. And we take away the worldview, and we must look at a biblical approach to what that means in the church. And behavior threat detection, especially module 1, gives you that approach. That gives you and your audience the biblical approach to understanding both the threat and how to implement security so it does not conflict with the church. And this maximizes the use of volunteers. Everybody's invited to this training. Volunteer security personnel, law enforcement, if you have them there, if they decide that they want to come, ushers, greeters, members of the children's ministry. If you have like a medical or safety response team, they need to come to this also. And again, this is given in one low price. So behavior threat detection, in our opinion, is one of the most, outside of your physical security assessment and your emergency action plan, is the most important element in not only protecting the church, but also in implementing an effective physical security program. Hey, if you've got questions about the programs, you can always email me at contact@michaelmannsecurityservices.com, or you can call me at 615-956-3912. And remember, folks, security is always about prevention, not response.